Good evening. I'm Malcolm Young, Dean of Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, California. Welcome to the last forum of the fall season. One of the United States' most provocative public intellectuals, Dr. Cornel West, is a philosopher, social critic, political activist, and a champion for racial justice through the traditions of the Black church, progressive politics, and jazz. He has written and edited over 30 books, including the classic Race Matters and Democracy Matters. He's a radio host, has appeared in 2 Matrix films, has made several spoken word and hip hop albums, has held professorships at Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, and currently is the Dietrich Bonhoeffer Chair at Union Theological Seminary. He has been called one of the world's top 50 thinkers of the post-COVID-19 age. He is, as he describes himself, a bluesman in the life of the mind, a jazzman in the world of ideas, forever on the move. So tonight we'll be talking about democracy, race, religion, and as he describes it, living and loving out loud. Brother Cornel, thank you so much for joining me tonight. The little introduction doesn't explain that you're also my teacher. Yeah. I'm going to say this. I want to come. You were one of the best teachers I've ever had in my life. And so the class, you probably don't remember me because it was a small class. And you may not remember, but it was the Erasmus, Hume, Schopenhauer, Royce class. And it must have been in 1996, I think. But every day I took notes. And so, when you're assembling your archives and you want a perfect, absolute verbatim notes for everything that happened in that class, you call me up because I'm the one who has it.
Wow, that's amazing. It's amazing, but it's a blessing to set eyes on you now, the Reverend Dr. Malcolm Clemens Young. Straight out of California, UC Berkeley, and Harvard University, MA and doctorate. Though, brother, you're a visionary leader now in San Francisco, and it's a beautiful thing to behold your witness. Very much so. We of course, we want to thank our very dear sisters, Rebecca and Mahogany. They've been just magnificent in terms of facilitating our being together. It was my dear brother David Kim. As you know, we were just walking downtown San Francisco. I was getting ready to give a talk at San Francisco State University, or University of San Francisco.
Yeah.
And he said, let's take a walk. And when he walked into the cathedral, and there we see the sisters. I said, oh, it'd be wonderful for you to be in dialogue with Brother Malcolm. I said, Malcolm, oh my God, from Harvard, is he actually here at this historic cathedral now? He said, oh, yes, it's what, 2015?
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
That's in 7 years.
I know it goes by in a flash. And I think one of the most helpful things that you gave me, among so many things, is you gave me a lot. I mean, one of the things that I learned from you is just the idea of white supremacy is just part of my vocabulary. You helped me open my eyes so much about that. But I mean, in so many other ways, you've helped me. I mean, I love your sense of style. And the first question I want to ask you is, what is being cool? Like, what is cool? I loved reading in your autobiography or autobiographical book about you just taking seriously, how do you present yourself in life? The presentation of self in everyday life, that Irving Goffman book. But I've always appreciated the way that you thoughtfully think about how you present yourself in life.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. I want to salute Sister Heidi, the First Lady.
The First Lady, who's right here and off camera.
We salute her, two precious ones. But for me, my brother, I grew up on the chocolate side of Sacramento, California. Irene, Clifton West, mom and dad. I'll never be one half of the human being that they were. Both of them are passed now. And my brother Clifton went to UC Berkeley too, with you, class of 72. That cool for us always meant being soulful. And when you're soulful is in one sense the sharing of a soothing sweetness against the backdrop of a grim catastrophe. But it's also, you see it in Muhammad Ali, you see it in Aretha Franklin and Curtis Mayfield. Actually at Harvard, we saw the Stanley Cavell.
Right.
It was also part of from Sacramento. that you're soulful because you muster the courage to be yourself. And in being yourself, you know there's negative and positive therein. So you wrestle with that tension and make that tension creative to be a force for good rather than destructive to fall into the pit of hate and revenge. And so it's like living on a tightrope. You know, it's like the James Brown band. You're going to push it, push it, push it all the way to the edge. Stevie Wonder's the same way. You see it in Toni Morrison's novels. You know, you push it to the edge and see what you're made of. And in the end, you want decency, integrity, honesty, but with that style. And each style is distinctive now. Each style, you know, Count Basie's style is not the same as Duke Ellington. Sarah Vaughan's not the same as Billie Holiday. But that sense of cool rootedness and soulfulness. And in the end, it's really all about the love. It's really the various kinds of love that we have.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think a part of the power of your message is that you connect with, like Count Basie, and Duke Ellington did his jazz mass at Grace Cathedral in the mid 1960s. And you're right. I mean, that work has such power over us. And so it does connect us in a deeper way than just kind of the world of ideas. It definitely does. Angela Davis is going to be preaching at Grace Cathedral in 2 weeks. And I wonder, I mean, you're somebody who thinks, well, first of all, I wanted to ask you about just your experience of the Black Panthers growing up. And then maybe you can think a little bit about just, what advice you might have for her, just, as she kind of frames the sermon and thinks about what her message is going to be and how she presents that message.
Well, no, I'm the last one to give any kind of advice to my dear sister Angela. I need to be asking for her advice. Yeah. She and I were actually at Oxford together. They had the 50th anniversary of Malcolm X's debate at the Oxford Union. They invited Angela and myself to be on the same stage and speak to the same proposition and issue that Malcolm spoke to in 64. We were in 2014, and we had a magnificent time together. Now, Angela herself, going back to Birmingham, Alabama, one of those girls who was killed by the cowardly white supremacists brothers there, the Ku Klux Klan in September of 63. One of those girls was a good friend of Angela Davis.
Yeah.
And so Angela herself has her own deep connection to not just Black community, but Christian language and faith. And even as a secular thinker, after reading Nietzsche and Hegel and Marx and so forth, she always carries with her that deep sense of compassion in the face of catastrophe, which is so much of the best of any of our churches. That's what the cross is about, and what that long Saturday is about after the death of Jesus, and then the surprise by joy on Easter morning. And so that even though she's deeply secular, she has a very rich connection to a tradition that shaped her and her family and her beloved mother, who was quite an activist, and others.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it very much. And I can imagine just you just being a young man and being so close to Oakland and being so connected to the Black Panthers. And I wonder, how does it look different to you now than it did when you were, 22 years old?
Well, I was always taken by the Panthers because they said what they meant what they said. They were sons and daughters of Malcolm X, who said sincerity is my main credential. I'm for truth, no matter who speaks it. I'm for justice, no matter who is for or against it. I'm first and foremost a human being. That's the Malcolm X, page 400 of the autobiography of Malcolm X that the Black Panthers were building on. It's just that they were so anti-church and anti-religious. You see, I am a Jesus-loving, free Black man. So I would always bring my Christian faith with me when I worked in the breakfast program, when I worked in the prison program. And that was one of the reasons why I never felt it right for me to join the Black Panther Party. I could work with them in solidarity, never just an ally, but in deep solidarity. We get shot together, we get shot together. But because they were just so hard, they had a certain dogmatic view about religion that I always felt that was something that needed to be called into question. And these days, of course, we don't really have an equivalent. We got the new Black Panther Party, and I've done a number of things with them but they're not at the same level, anywhere near the same level as the party founded by Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, with Erica Huggins and a host of others. It's good to see young folk out there fighting, willing to die. But the Black Panther Party founded by Huey, Huey Newton was a PK. You know that, preacher.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Reverend Walter Newton from Bethel Baptist in Monroe, and he was assistant pastor at Antioch Baptist right there in Oakland. And then the one and only J. Alfred Smith, Allen Temple. He was Huey's pastor, baptized him, gave the eulogy and so forth. And of course, J. Alfred Smith is just a living legend. He really is. So that for me, when I look at young folk these days, they're doing some wonderful things. Don't get me wrong, but it's not a moment of ascending social motion, momentum, and movements the way it was when I was coming along.
Yeah. Now
you're dealing with unbelievable spiritual decay and more decrepitude, and the organized greed and the escalating hatred is moving more and more, not just to the center, but to the driver's seat or in the saddle. And so we, in the 60s, we were dealing with, American apartheid, Jim Crow, patriarchy, homophobia, transphobia, imperial invasions and occupations around the world, Latin America, Vietnam, and what have you. But we did have a sense of being on the up and up. We were moving up. By the time you got to Berkeley in the mid 80s, you could still feel that spirit, that geist, that esprit, you see. Whereas nowadays, these young folk, they live in the most commodified culture in the history of the world. It's all buying and selling. Everybody's for sale. Everything is for sale, from politicians to screwdrivers, from soap to institutions. And so they need a rich spiritual wind at their back, a strong moral and spiritual wind at their back, even as they engage in struggles for justice. And you remember Ryan O'Neill's great line in Moral Man and Moral Society: any justice that's only justice soon degenerates into something less than justice. If you don't have a genuine care for the people, a willingness to take a risk, a genuine love for the people, you're not going to be on the justice train that long. You're on for a while, and then you jump off, on to the next career, on to the next opportunity, you see. And so thank God, to do all at Grace and other places there in San Francisco, with all of the homeless and grotesque wealth inequality and polarization and gangsterization is taking place in every city in the country, that you all provide a rich spirituality tied to the morality, and then the straightening of one's back up and fighting for the kingdom, which embraces a struggle for social justice.
Yeah, I love that. One of the teachers I had at Berkeley was Harry Edwards, the sociologist of sports. Oh, yeah. And he was able to basically create a whole new academic field of the study of sociology of sports. And he was the first person who ever said that college athletes should be compensated. If university administrations are going to make millions of dollars off college athletes, that somehow the university should be doing more for them. And he said it was an equity issue, a race issue, a class issue. But just in the same way that he had kind of a sociology of sport, I think of you as having kind of a philosophy of music. And I think I just remember you're the only person who ever told me to read Arthur Schopenhauer. And I did it. I did what you told me to do. And there is that sense of that for him. I mean, that despair and that pessimism, there you go, right there, your right hand, right there. Exactly.
We got a little off the Schopenhauer.
Yeah, right there. It's just like 2 feet beyond me too. Idea of the music, of music being a way of transcending things, a music, a way of kind of overcoming the tragic elements of life. And I just wonder if you can talk just a little bit about just kind of your philosophy of music and just your practical experience of music, because you're the only person I know who makes records.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, I have a lot of fun doing it. It's really the joy and trying to create a danceable education, because you're trying to to touch people, unsettle and unnerve people, as well as move people. You remember Horace talks about delight as well as instruct in any kind of artistic rendition. So you do want to do something that delights people as well as instructs them. But I'll tell you this, my brother, that let's say in the history of the United States, history of the very fragile democratic experiment, the history of the treacherous American empire, and they're both at the same time. We're both democratic experiment and an empire simultaneously. That the white supremacy has cut so deep in every nook and cranny that mobilized every institution, from the scientific academies to the churches to the cultural apparatus as a whole, that when it came to staying in contact, not just with Black people's humanity, but Black people being able to express themselves creatively and make contact with white people and other people's humanity so they can reach that human space, is primarily been the history of American music and American sports. The history of American music is qualitatively different than the history of American politics. Yeah. It's qualitatively different than the history of American economics. Yeah. I mean, we've had a Black president. Hey, we had Lester Young, who was the president decades before.
Exactly.
And we appreciate Obama doing his thing, even though I don't appreciate the drones dropped on innocent people, the Wall Street domination, another number of things I'm critical of. But I appreciate the achievement. But when it comes to music, you know, it's not a big thing to see the geniuses, the Louis Armstrongs and the Count Basies and the Dinah Washingtons and the Kendrick Lamars. We can go on and on. Curtis Mayfield and others. Same would be true in sports. You see, the sports, they take somebody like Joe Louis, or you can go on back to Jack Johnson in boxing. We haven't even got to Althea Gibson yet in tennis. That in a white supremacist society, the sports was one of the few places where there was fairness. Yeah. You see, every other space in the culture was a site of unfairness. But when you get in that ring, you got one referee, and Jack Johnson, what you gonna do to Max? Max, what you gonna do to Jack? We got fair rules. Let's see who wins. Ooh, he knocks him out July 10th, April 4th. You know, dozens of Black people are killed the next day. Yeah, yeah. Because it's symbolic triumph in a context of fairness. The Black man wins. Yeah. Joe Louis, Muhammad Ali, we can go on and on. Sugar Ray, all of these are great athletes. They're artists, essentially, you know, but what the Greeks would call arete at the highest level of excellence. But it's in a context in which they were given a chance. Yeah. They were given a chance.
And even just a voice. And you're right, Muhammad Ali as a kind of poet of modern life. Like, what other athlete has come to us with a message in quite that way? I mean, although I do think of other Black activist athletes, and that is a way that we, right there.
And you know who edited this book? Toni Morrison.
Oh, wow.
My Own Story. Toni Morrison was the editor at Random House. She got this book just like she got Angela Davis's autobiography.
Yeah, that autobiography.
She was writing, you know, actually begun to become more famous writing novels and things. But I didn't want to cut you off. But
No. Heidi's been handing me all the Schopenhauer books. There's a whole shelf.
Long live Arthur.
I know. Long live.
You know, he went to Rossini operas every night with his dog. Oh, yes, he did. Played his flute, but
played his flute, exactly.
Yeah, no, Arthur was something. No, he's very candid, very. You know, he was thoroughly convinced that his pessimism was consistent with the Christian faith. You know that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the crucifixion. What you said, the long Saturday. You know,
that long. I mean, he would end one of his chapters talking about. Well, Meister Eckhart has already said this in his sermon on the prodigal son. If you listen to it or read it very, very closely, you'll see that the mystic, the great German mystic, has already said what I'm talking about. And you say, Arthur, we all thought you were agnostic. We all thought that you were pessimistic. Yes, I am, but there's who are preoccupied with the cross, the dark night of the soul, the underside of the human condition, who have said it better than I have. It's just that I don't get to Easter, that's all.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? In your autobiography, you talk about people who love Black people, and you're right. Arthur Schopenhauer. There was a part of him that might have been misogynistic, but there was a part of him that really empathized with suffering that he saw in life.
Well, you remember his defense of the slaves?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Africa.
Yeah.
And the two examples that he gives in his text, he loves dogs. He thinks dogs are capable of depths of love that we human beings are not. And a lot of people could take that argument very seriously. Dogs are really quite fascinating creatures. But he said, but with Black folk, not being on the level of dogs, Black folk being human, their treatment was the litmus test of the hypocrisy of so much of modern European civilization. And Arthur hit that very hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very hard.
You know, I know a lot of people are looking at the Supreme Court this week and the affirmative action decisions. And I know we want to hear from you about just what your take is on the Supreme Court in general and just, affirmative action too. I mean, your life has been dedicated to teaching and you're in the university. You're closer to this than almost anybody we can think of.
Well, I mean, I like to be open-minded and knowing that future is unfinished and unpredictable. But we're living in neo-fascist times, though, brother.
Yeah.
Those are the dominant forces. You remember the great Rabbi Heschel's lecture, No Religion is an Island. He said the biggest movement, the biggest ecumenical movement in the modern world was nihilism.
Yeah.
This sense of meaninglessness and getting caught up with the dominant forms of idolatry. And the escalating nihilism of our own day is going hand in hand with a cold-heartedness and a callousness toward the weak and vulnerable, and more feeling as if, given their hatred of the professional managerial class, which they view as neoliberal, which it is. I mean, the dominant orientation of the professional managerial class in America is neoliberal for the most part. And the backlash against that is a populism. But then with the white supremacy and the male supremacy kicking in, and the hatred of the Arabs and Muslims and Jews playing a very important role there, it takes a neo-fascist form, which is very distinctively American, but it's still neo-fascist. And I think that the courts, which is the courts, Supreme Court's not neo-fascist, it's deeply conservative, but it is facilitating that move. So I don't look to any kind of victories when it comes to affirmative action, even same-sex marriage. I mean, my God, our defense of our precious gay brothers and lesbian sisters and precious trans folk, non-binaries, has to be consistent, has to be militant.
Yeah,
because that's what we're entering. These are very grim days. I think
grim days. There's just a lot of fear here in San Francisco. It's almost tangible, the sense of just impending doom, that everything just hangs on a knife edge, and just wondering how far this will all take us.
But we shouldn't get discouraged, though. That's the important thing. That's what it is to be a blues people. And the blues is not a function of skin pigmentation. The blues is a function of spiritual formation and moral cultivation. And it can come in our own Christian form, you and I holding on to a Palestinian Jew named Jesus. It could be Judaic, it could be Buddhist like the late great Bell Hooks. It could be Hindu like Gandhi. It could be, comes in a number of different forms. It could be secular, Dear brother Michael Lerner, we just lost Peter Gable, Tiku Magazine. These are two towering Jewish figures in the last 50 years who've been prophetic till the very end. So we need as much as we can get, as many as we can get in this anti-fascist coalition against the escalating neo-fascism. But we shouldn't get discouraged. We just have to be very honest and candid with what we're up against. And we happen to be living at a time of such just overwhelming spiritual decay and moral decrepitude, as I said.
Yeah. I mean, I think so much of the power of your classes is being able to introduce young people, to talk to them about kind of resources for understanding the tragic part of human life. I think of even just, we read a little bit of Herman Melville in our seminar together. And I think you do a good job of just helping students to be honest about that tragic part of life. And I wonder if you can talk just about other figures that you think are are kind of helpful for us to look at, to understand their own tragic sense of our own time.
My dear brother.
Oh yeah, right.
Source of self-regard.
Yeah.
Toni Morrison.
Right.
And who are one of the heroes in Toni Morrison's text? Herman Melville.
Yes. Yeah.
There's another one.
Yeah.
Lorraine Hansberry.
Yeah.
You see that? And that Raisin in the Sun is not about upward mobility. It's about wrestling with forms of death, the way in which the old man dies and the fight over his money, how that money is going to be divided, and how do you make the shift? Talking about freedom on the one hand, and now little Walter only wants to talk about money and finds himself spiritually empty, and he gets pimped by his gangster friends, losing the money, and he has to come to a awakening. And we talked about this awakening in the sense of Thoreau.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's not just being woke in a matter of a new consciousness, because you stay woke, you're going to suffer from insomnia.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Thoreau had a conception of waking from sleepwalking, and the sleepwalking of those that's on their backs that the status quo remains. And when they wake up, their backs become straightened. Brother Martin used to say, anytime ordinary people straighten their backs up, they're going somewhere, because folk can't ride your back unless it's bent.
Yeah.
That's the kind of awakening. Sly Stone, Vallejo, stand. You've been sitting much too long. There's a permanent crease in your right and wrong. There's a cross for you to bear, things to go through if you going anywhere. That's Sly from Vallejo. See,
yeah.
Very a genius that he is, still going actually. So that we shouldn't get discouraged, but we, in our attempt to be courageous, we have to realize that we're up against, some very, very ugly forces, really, hounds of hell in the language of Howard Thurman.
Yeah, yeah. My wife Heidi wanted to ask you about your experience of the Matrix films. What was it like making them, and just how do you look back on those days when you're working on that project?
Oh, I thank your dear wife, my dear sister Heidi. Though I tell you. Yeah, those were some golden days, man. Wachowski's, the artistic geniuses. We had reading groups. We were down in Australia when the films were made. We made both 2 and 3 at the same time. So we had our lines for both films. We can do 2 one day and the third one the next day, go back and forth. But he'd have reading groups. And who would he read? Schopenhauer, obsessed with William James, The Will to Believe.
Wow.
Oh, yes. These are very philosophically oriented artists.
Interesting. That's so fascinating. Now I'm going to go back and see him in a different way.
Keanu show up there with his reading text with old brother. We had Marvin Gaye's daughter was there. Nona was there. Who else? We had a whole group there. Jada.
Oh, yeah.
Jada Smith was there. And Will would show up sometimes because he came a couple of times when we were down there, but she was there in the field. And we just had these magnificent discussions. It was very rich.
Yeah. Well, they were so lucky to have you there. You'd be the perfect person for a conversation like that.
Fishburne had a lot to say about that.
So what kind of, where does his thought come from? I mean, what were some of his influences?
Fishburne?
Yeah.
I think Fishburne actually was deeply shaped by the great playwrights.
Oh, right.
Great playwrights. It was August Wilson. It was Lorraine Hansberry. It was Eugene O'Neill. It was Tennessee Williams. And then going all the way back, in the West to Shakespeare and Sophocles. His office was right next to mine. And I actually had probably the greatest book ever written on Antigone by George Steiner, the late great George Steiner.
I remember, yeah.
83 called Antigones. You remember with an S?
Yeah.
And oh my God, some of the most majestic literary criticism ever written in the last 50 years. Page 231 to 277. He was talking about the 5 conflicts that's at work in Antigone that all of us have to come to terms with. It's the erotic in terms of the love between 2 persons. It is family in terms of mother, father, daughter, son. It's the individual and community. And then it's the quick and the dead. And then it's the human beings and God.
Yeah.
We had all 5 conflicts simultaneously enacted in Antigone.
Yeah.
It's very hard to find any play in which all 5 of them are going on at the same time.
Right.
Hamlet has about 2, but we won't get into that, right? But we would have these discussions. He would say, Dr. West, let me take a look at this George Steiner. I said, that Steiner got a lot going on now, brother.
I got another shelf load of George Steiner in that office over there. Oh my gosh, right next to Fergus Kerr.
He got his own blind spots, of course, but all coming out of that Central European secular Jewish tradition.
Yes, exactly.
With Kafka and others, he's quite a towering figure, though, especially in terms of wrestling with catastrophe. He was talking mainly about the show and the Holocaust.
Yeah.
At the backdrop for him. But catastrophes of whatever sort, ecological catastrophes, psychic catastrophes, political catastrophes, economic catastrophes. Right.
So we have a tradition of taking questions from our audience.
Wonderful.
I was going to call. So Dorothy Saruda is she was a professor at San Francisco State. She was in the Black Studies department. She was the chair of Black Studies and retired pretty recently. I was going to give her a call, and I didn't even need to because she wrote a little question out for us. She said, I saw you at San Francisco State a few weeks ago and now at church. How do you think the two could inform each other, the church and the university? How do they inform each other?
Ooh, wonderful question. I appreciate her being in both places.
I know we're such a blessing to have her. She's so helpful to me in so many different ways.
Well, one is that we have to be multi-contextual. We have to be able to move from one context to another. One reason why I've taught in prisons for 42 years is that it's very important to be able to humble yourself and learn and listen from people in context that you are not spending all of your time in.
That's so true.
So that our precious church folk can learn a whole lot from the precious academic folk. The precious academic folk can learn a whole lot from the precious church folk. I'd say same so about the mosque. I'd say about the synagogue, about the temple. Now, of course, I'd go and say nightclub too, because I'm
right. Exactly, that's your style.
I'm a hang loose Baptist. You know what I mean? love Jesus, and the rest is commentary, brother. So cognac and gonna be some dancing, cutting in rugs, and a whole lot of other things going on too.
Yeah.
But that multi-contextuality, part of our problem these days is too many of our fellow citizens live in silos, or they live in bubbles. So they're not really multi-contextual. And these bubbles can be multicultural. You see, you can get upper middle class folk of all the different colors, and they're still part of a bubble. They just got black and white and red and Asian now, but it's still a bubble.
Yeah.
So you got to get out of your various bubbles, and the church is one of the grand institutions in our civil society, and Grace is a good place to start, and Third Baptist, magnificent place. My brother Amos.
Right. Oh my gosh, Amos Brown, what an amazing
Amos
figure.
Brown is he's a living legend.
He's a living legend. He's such a leader now in San Francisco.
He's still going. We were just at his church just a few months ago.
Yeah.
But he would say, I think, the same thing, that he's learned so much from the academy, just like J. Alfred Smith. But at the same time, the academy learns so much from him and his witness, his magnificent, courageous ministry. And you have that wonderful tension. You see, I'm a jazz man in the sense that, I don't believe in the elimination of tension. The question is, how do you transform tension into something creative? But it's always going to be tension. You just learn how to ride it. Like Toni Morrison said, you just got to ride the wind and ride the air. Yeah. Sometimes you go under in the valley, you come back, you're on the mountaintop, ain't going to be there for too long. Catastrophe's on its way to your house.
Right.
How are you going to fortify yourself for that catastrophe when it comes? It could be death of a loved one, betrayal of a friend. It could be an earthquake, as in 1906 in San Francisco. It could be political elites, greedy and narrow and xenophobic. It could be white supremacy hunting you down. It could be so many different kinds of evils that are trying to dampen people's spirits.
Yeah.
And
well, that's why, I mean, look at Dorothy Cerruta, and she has got a twinkle in her eye. You look at her and you can just imagine what she was like when she was 5 years old, because she's like so open to the world. She sees the horrible things, but she's just got such a good heart. So, you know, are a lot of people asking about Kanye West these days? I don't know, you know, what your thoughts are on just how things are unfolding. We just see things through the lens of the mass media. And so it's kind of hard to understand what's going on. Do you have anything to clarify what's going on for us?
Well, I mean, I've only met my brother a couple of times, and it could be my cousin. He's got that wonderful last name.
Exactly, you know? Right. I was
thinking we both have Oklahoma roots, but no, I'm in deep prayer for the brother. You know, he's a towering artist. There's no doubt about that. I don't think he ever got over the death of his precious mother. Yes. Didn't have time to grieve. It's not an excuse. So many things that he has said, I think, are just wrong, unpersuasive, in many ways just deplorable, but he's still a human being. So I don't trash anybody. I don't believe in trashing anybody. I believe in, you know, I'm a Christian in terms of hating the sin and still loving the sinner, or hating the domination and injustice and still trying to stay in contact with the humanity of the perpetuator of the domination of injustice. I mean, it's just sad that he gets so much attention.
Yeah, it is.
And, you know, you got all of these wise folk, black and otherwise, and he says something that is completely wrong or xenophobic or whatever, and he gets front page treatment. You say, "Oh Lord, have mercy." But that's part of our celebrity culture. That's part of our.
Yeah, it's been very difficult to just watch that unfold. You know, I mean, one of the things is I think about this a lot, because you really did grow up in a totally different world without the technology of communications that we have, without websites, the internet, email, social media, all the other things. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about just how those technologies, communications, are changing us. I talk a lot about just like the Gutenberg Bible, and, you know, 5 years after the first run of Bibles were printed, people had no idea what this was going to actually do and mean. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what these technologies mean for the human spirit and for our ability to connect with each other.
Wow, you got wonderful questions. I'm telling you that.
Well, you're very sweet.
I just saw that Gutenberg Bible in the Library of Congress. I went to hear my dear brother Jeffrey Stout give the Kellogg lecture.
Yeah, how's he doing, Jeff Stout?
Of democratic liberty. And I would say anybody gets a chance to see that on YouTube, the Tree of Democratic Liberty, just gave it 4 days ago.
Oh, and, great. I'll check it out.
Powerful. There was a Gutenberg Bible sitting there. And we, of course, began this discussion talking about the great Erasmus, who was the greatest public intellectual in the history of the modern West, no matter how far we go, and given his unbelievable influence, very much facilitated by that new technology.
Exactly, totally.
Facilitated by that new technology. Yeah. But there's no doubt that part of our problem these days is that it's just hard to gain people's attention and to get them to focus on things that deeply matter, like life and death and joy and sorrow. Our market-driven culture is one that promotes a joyless quest for insatiable pleasures. And that's not the kind of attention that one needs to live a wise life, a loving life, let alone sustain a democracy. You've got to be able to attend to public life, attend to integrity, honesty, decency, enact it, embody it. And the only way you do that is attending to the examples, attend to the stories that provide exemplars so that you actually want to be more like a Jesus or Hillel or Muriel Rukeyser or Martin King or Harvey Milk, whatever grand example you have. You see. And it's just so difficult to do that. And the modern technology is, you know, that's T.S. Eliot, brother, distracted by distractions with distractions and more distractions and more distractions and more distractions for money. See, that's important. It's not just happening in a vacuum. It's under the aegis of capital with Brother Musk now taking over Twitter. Now, what does that mean? The richest man on the globe who thinks that somehow he is the authoritative X or Y.
Yeah.
And takes over this major technological instrumentality. Now we don't know exactly what he has in mind. Doesn't look good so far.
Yeah.
I don't know. What did you say? The N-word went up 500% the first day.
I heard that too. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So one person controlling the town square, the discourse in the town square, it's very upsetting.
It's like, good God, it's worse than the old days of the kings and queens and monarchs with these new oligarchs, because they do it, they think, in the name of freedom. I mean, he really sees himself as a free marketeer. He sees himself as promoting liberty, and I am deeply committed to rights and liberties. People do have a right to be wrong.
Yeah.
So we have to allow for people's views to express. I mean, the anthem of Black folk, lift every voice. It's not follow my voice, I'm the Pied Piper, fall in line. No. When you lift every voice, you're going to have right wing, center, left wing, so forth and so on. But when the power shifts so drastically and so rawly and coarsely toward people who seem to not even seem, but actually have such a callousness toward the vulnerable, brother, that's Thrasymachus triumphing over Socrates in Plato's Republic. Might makes right. Yeah. Power dictates morality.
Yeah.
That's the makings and forms of neo-fascism.
Yeah, it really is. I think so much of just, I was so inspired by Race Matters, Democracy Matters, but just knowing you're such a deeply democratic thinker. And I think, I saw you like dozens of times at different American Academy of Religion meetings, the neo-pragmatism and pragmatism meetings. Yeah. That form of philosophy just speaks so deeply to me. There's so many times I'm not using the language or referencing the thinkers, but I wonder if you can talk a little bit about pragmatism, your book, I was partly what was introduced me to pragmatism. I was, the American Invasion of Philosophy.
Remember that book?
I do. I have it right.
33 years ago, we talked about the tree. We just talked about
the tree. But talk a little bit. Could you tell us a little bit about just like what attracts you to pragmatism? How do you describe it to ordinary people?
Well, Sly Stone wrote a song called I Am Everyday People. Yeah. Everybody is a star. You see, and pragmatism comes out of Ralph Waldo Emerson again. You know this from Stanley Cavell's work and others, right? And Emerson is fundamentally about the extraordinary found among ordinary people and ways in which everyday people, when they ascend to form the spiritual moral excellence, can take their genius and transform it into practical power. That's the last line of his great essay on experience. The world exists in order for, and by genius, he didn't mean isolated individuals out there thinking they're so smart. He meant geniality, the largeness of their vision, the largeness of their hearts, the largeness of their minds being translated through public life into a practical power that sustains democratic experiments. John Dewey's great essay on Emerson was The Philosopher of Democracy.
Yeah, exactly.
In 1903. And so that's very much part and parcel where I come from. I didn't read it initially in Emerson. I heard it right there in when James Cleveland wrote his classic song, Ordinary People.
Right.
God uses ordinary people. That's Hebrew scripture.
It is.
David, Joseph, Esther, these are ordinary people standing up in front of kings and powers and committing sins, but also trying to transcend it. These ordinary, everyday people ought to be at the center. Of course, Abe Lincoln used to say what? God must really love ordinary people. God made so many of them, right? That's Lincoln's democratic sensibility, even given he's still wrestling with certain kind of white supremacist elements, but he's still concerned about trying to make sure that Black people at least can vote and playing that crucial role in overthrowing the Confederate army. But it's really democracy, not so much just as a mode of governance, but as you know, a way of life.
Yeah, completely.
And that's what jazz is, symbolic democratic action.
Yeah.
Because it's ordinary people picking up instruments Some of them going to play them better than others. Some of them working harder than others. Some of them going to have a genius like Coltrane. Some of them going to be sweet like Ben Webster. Some of them going to be magnificently capacious like Mary Lou Williams.
Yeah.
But they're ordinary people. And what are they doing? After hard work, mastery of craft and technique, they're lifting their voices. They're not just echoes, extensions of echo chambers. They're lifting their voices. And you can't be a jazz musician if you don't find your voice. What is unique and singular about your voice as opposed to somebody else's? And when you get all those voices together, like a jazz orchestra or a democratic society, then ordinary people are going to be saying, we don't choose to be poor. We don't choose to go to decrepit schools. We don't choose indecent housing. We don't choose lack of health care. We want that for everybody. And yet we want a spirit of, it's more than just love, though, but it's a sensitivity, a for realness, and a vulnerability, and even an intimacy. That's the stuff that matters in a human life.
Yeah, I just think of Charles Sanders Peirce, this idea of this evolving consensus on what is true when we bring our deepest self into the conversation. And I love that vision. I mean, the pragmatic question of what is truth, James talking about the cash value of an idea, it is part of that.
It is. And the two great traditions in the history of the American empire is Emerson, Walt Whitman, culminating with James Baldwin.
Yeah, right.
Melville, Eugene O'Neill, Faulkner, culminating in Toni Morrison.
Yeah.
And they go hand in hand. It's just Melville is grimmer.
Yeah.
He's darker. He's got a sense of the tragic that cuts very deep in that Moby Dick, very deep beneath the cerebral, very deep in Confidence Man and Billy Budd. Emerson's got a sense of the tragic, but it's not as deep as Melville's.
Yeah. I think of that doubloon chapter when in Moby Dick, when they're swearing allegiance to Ahab, and I mean it's funny. I mean it's again, it's democracy. It's a community. It's multicultural, exactly.
Same sex,
part of it, exactly. Same sex relationships, completely.
He's 32 years old when he publishes that novel, man.
Yeah. And he said that writing it was like being boiled in hellfire. Well, it was one of my favorite things, by the way, I just got to say about your autobiography, when you said, I'm a reader. And I was like, she said, I'm a reader. I could never stop reading. And, but writing, I enjoy writing. I'm glad to write, but it's not the only thing. It doesn't keep me alive. And I felt that resonated so deeply with me when you said that. But we have tons of questions that are coming.
Oh, sure.
So one question which was related to the one we just had is, what is your outlook on the current state and future of democracy?
Depends on how hard we fight for it. I never talk about the future independent of what we do now. The future is not something external to the present. It depends on how well we are connected with the sources and resources of the best of our past that we mobilize and then use to intervene, to act, to think, to laugh, to imagine, to fight, to organize. Art in an artistic way, as well as a political and economic way, in the present. If we don't have a massive moral and spiritual renaissance, then we're headed to neo-fascist times. I mean, there's just no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But the best of America has been, in part, these waves of awakenings. That's what the abolitionist movement was about. It's just a few thousand people, many millions in the country, that forced an awakening. Same would be true with the feminist movement, first wave, beginning in Seneca Falls. Same would be true with the trade union movement. Same would be true with the anti-homophobic movement, the anti-transphobic movement. And churches, it's true for mosques and synagogues and temples as well, but churches in our prophetic modes have played fundamental roles in those moral and spiritual renaissance.
Yeah.
Never majority.
Yeah.
We're not looking for the majority of Baptists, the majority of Episcopalians, the majority of Methodists, the majority of Pentecostals. No. We're looking for the quality of that prophetic leaven in the larger loaf. That's what we're at.
Yeah, I love that. Here's another question that's just come in. Would you say more about what is required to live the long Saturday, which is Holy Saturday, and how to live after the crucifixion while crucifixions continue without taking for granted that Sunday morning will come?
Yeah, I think one is just intellectually and artistically wrestling with those great artists of the long Saturdays, the Samuel Beckett. I mean, waiting for Godot in some ways is about a long Saturday. Just tell Godot, you saw us. We want to be seen for who we are. We want to be recognized. Yeah. But the Golgotha is over. The catastrophe is real. And we don't think that Godot is really going to show up. There's not going to be a coincidence of the Messianic, which is the bringing together what our Jewish brothers and sisters call Hesed, that steadfast love spread to orphan and widow and fatherless mother, coinciding with the not yet, the deferred kingdom, or the future tense, as George Steiner used to put it. Same would be true with Chekhov. I mean, I think Chekhov is the greatest literary artist of late European modernity, just like Shakespeare is the greatest at the beginning. Yeah. But Rabelais and some few others give him some serious competition. But we shouldn't view these artists as racehorses, but we're just talking about great figures, right?
Yeah.
And Chekhov is all about the long Saturday. People can read, The Student Tonight in 3 pages. You can read In the Ravine in 75 pages. It's Three Sisters, I think the greatest play of the 20th century in modern Europe, which was performed January 1901, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. The first month of the century, we get the deepest play. Right. But the Three Sisters, waiting. Are you going to get to Moscow? That's the long Saturday. So the question becomes, how do you equip and fortify yourself for that? And that's what you're able to see in how Chekhov and how Beckett and the others try to generate forms of connection and camaraderie and conviviality and community. It's much more difficult for Beckett than it is for Chekhov. But for Chekhov, it's hard too. And we know in our churches, it's very, very difficult because that long Saturday element is always there. The big difference for we Christians is that we've had some realized eschatology already, which is to say, we've had experiences of our lives being changed and transformed by a love that we cannot fully account for. So the mystery of that love and the power of that love is something that we have in the long Saturday experience. Yeah. So we got some foretaste, and sometimes it doesn't seem like it's enough, but we got a foretaste. This miracle of love, even given the wretched creatures that we too often choose to be, and yet the wonderfulness of that love that is undeniable if you've really undergone the metanoia, the transformation, the conversion in one's connection with that Jesus of Nazareth, you see.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I love about church on Sunday. It's like, I didn't invite these people. I'm like, but God has brought the most extraordinary people into our life. And Bobby McFerrin, the musician, is starting a kind of a musical program before the 11 o'clock services. And what a blessing, though. I mean, just to walk him in the door and say, hey, Malcolm, you care so much about singing. I can help that. So I do love the way God just brings us together in this unexpected way. The Spirit kind of brings us into these places where we didn't choose everything. We're not in control of everything. I mean, it's back to that democracy. But I think that's what church feels like to me right now. I think about the university too. Just having read your autobiography, the university has such an impact on your life, and you've had such an impact on the university. I wonder if you can talk about just how colleges have changed in your life and just kind of where you see things going too.
Well, I mean, I've been so blessed to go to a number of colleges and universities, spend time there. But I've been blessed to meet magnificent people in every context.
Yeah.
On the block around the
When
corner.
you're talking about prison, I was thinking about people I met in prison are like the last people in America who can focus and concentrate on something, right? Because they don't have cell phones. They're always,
And it's no accident that Waiting for Godot was their favorite play, just like Zoom or the Commodores is their anthem. Zoom, I want to fly away. It's a freedom dream. Trying to get some distance from all this pain, a sense of what it would be like to get outside where I can stretch out to be myself fully outside of these bars and so forth. So it was that yearning, the Ernst Bloch principle of hope, the not yet still having this power to reorient people in a certain way. Yeah. Now, for me, I mean, colleges these days are like any other spot. They produce professional managers, and they're more and more commodified, highly professionalized, more and more bureaucrats in the administration as opposed to faculty, because they're more and more top heavy. The students are viewed more and more as customers rather than citizens in the making. And so just like in church, we're in the world, but not of the world. We have to be in the university, but not of the university. Yeah. I tell the brothers, be in the prison, but not of the prison. Yeah. You got access to a love of freedom, a history, a sense of what it means to be human that's different than the prison, but you're there now. You're going to be moving. And all of us have a death sentence in time and space anyway. Yeah. And so in that sense, we're all dealing with how we're going to wrestle with death, dread, despair, disappointment in the world, but not of the world. Right. And so the academy can have magnificent things going on, but its dominant orientation more and more, my dear brother, at your beloved Berkeley and our beloved Harvard, and even at Union, God bless Union Seminary, great place that it is. We've got to resist the commodification and the bureaucratization and focus on vocation. What's the call? What is your relation to the best of the traditions that inform you, whatever they are? And most importantly, what kind of backbone? Yeah. What kind of integrity? What kind of courage? Back to Muhammad Ali, 22 years old, fighting Sonny Liston. Yeah. Has he lost his mind? Yeah, yeah. Oh, I mean, just imagine how scary that would be. You're right. Practice, he did all that he did and still needed some spiritual support. Of course, Malcolm X was there at the fight. Yeah. With Sam Cooke giving him some real spiritual advice. But he comes out of Mount Zion Baptist Church, his beloved mother, Odessa. Right. She's a bona fide member, took little cashes every Sunday to Mount Zion Baptist Church. So even when he becomes Muhammad Ali, even when he becomes a Muslim, first member of Nation of Islam under Honorable Elijah Muhammad, then breaks and becomes a Sunni Muslim, he still has the stamp of those Black folk in Louisville, Kentucky. Bell Hooks got the stamp from those folk in Kentucky, even when she becomes a Buddhist. Yeah. And we miss Bell. We miss Muhammad Ali. We miss so many, though, brother. We miss so many in these days and time. I don't want to let the time's just passed so much. Everybody told me, don't ask him about Charles Sanders Peirce. Don't talk to him about. Oh, no, I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. But I had to. And not enough of your students can say this, but I want to just tell you how much I love you and what a gift your life has been to mine. And I'm still on the reading list that you set me off on when I was in my 20s, and I'm still blessed by your ministry to me. Every year, I'm blessed by what I learned in your class. Wow, that's beautiful. And the beautiful thing I can say is, in addition to your brilliant mind, that your heart is still golden and it's bubbling over with a joy and a zest for life and light. You were like that then. And thanks to Heidi and your mama and daddy and kids and friends and faith, you still got that, Brother Malcolm. And that's a beautiful thing. A beautiful thing. We both very blessed in that regard, don't we? We are. And I tell you, reading your Living and Loving Out Loud book, I just was so blessed to be able to read that, because I've always wanted to know the story of the person behind all these ideas. And that was a gift to me. Well, I was blessed to work with David Rich, and I wanted to work so closely with him because, as you know, he did Smokey Robinson, Aretha Franklin, Marvin Gaye, Ray Charles. And so, and to be able to work with him. We had a time. But brother, love you right back, man. You stay strong, and God bless your ministry.
Well, thank you so much, Brother Cornel, and God bless everybody out there who's watching and part of our conversation tonight.